everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Brenda.
Yes, all that energy, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So like Brock said, thank you for staying and listening through all these presentations. Hopefully you all get something wonderful from mine. But like John said in my introduction, I worked with the Detroit Food Policy Council over the last 6 months. And today I want to talk to you all about why community engagement is important in policymaking, offer you a few recommendations that I gave to the Food Policy Council around community engagement, and finally, how I got to those recommendations. So first, a little bit of background. As most of you already know, Detroit is currently under a lot of construction right now. Really, there's a lot of financial dispossession, the dissolution of school districts, high unemployment rates, and the list goes on. But the biggest problem that I'm here to talk to you all about today is the serious disconnect between Detroiters and policy reform. So apathy over here, where Detroiters are, is very high, and over here, where city government is, there hasn't been a direct force or form of outreach to Detroiters to figure out what their needs are. And I guess this is where the Detroit Food Policy Council comes in. In November 2009, the Detroit Food Policy Council was founded to serve as an advisory board to the City Council. Because they have that privilege of advising the City Council, they also are blessed with the responsibility to be advocates on behalf of inner-city Detroiters. And that brings me to why community engagement is really important. Community engagement allows for policy to be carried out in the most ethical and equitable way possible. Because there are so many issues in Detroit at the moment, there is a lot of room and opportunity for intervention. And if Detroiters are not involved in this policy-making process, they're at risk of being deprived of their rights, depleted of resources, and being displaced overall. So when I showed up to the Food Policy Council, it kind of gave me this question: how do we involve people to talk about this really simple yet essential subject of food under this really scary umbrella or scroll? Right. And so like Brock and Tyler mentioned earlier, relationship building is really important when it comes to community engagement and bringing folks into this policy-making process. And like Jenny and Brian mentioned earlier, taking surveys and conducting listening sessions is also equally important. But with food policy councils being as small as they are, they're 21 members, and normally don't have staff or have 1 to 2 staff, recognizing an organization's capacity is extremely important. And so in my report, I conducted 2 case studies of 2 organizations, the Open Food Policy Council and the Minnesota Food Charter, who I thought did the best job of recognizing their capacity and wisely using their resources to conduct or create relationships, hold listening sessions, to gauge where community members thought their highest priorities were for food. I also interviewed the founders of the Food Policy Council, all of whom were a part of DBCFSN, Hallie's organization, the Detroit Black Food Security Network. And it was interesting, their insights to me about the way the Food Policy Council in Detroit was formed. It's rare because they're a grassroots organization, and usually food policy councils are found by university bodies or governing bodies. But this one had a more radical founding. So that was really interesting to learn about. So I had a lot of recommendations for the Food Policy Council, but I wanted to emphasize 3, of which I'm going to speak to you about today. It's really important that food policy councils identify audiences of interest, that board and staff in Food Policy Council go through anti-racism training, especially in the city of Detroit, and focus on a consistent collaboration of resources. So identifying audience. One story that I have working with the Food Policy Council members was how, I don't know, uncomfortable people seemed about, being very specific about their targeted audiences at the meetings. There was a hesitance and conservatism around what seemed politically incorrect or uncomfortable. But when I got council members on one-on-one conversations, these are the types of targeted communities that they talked to me about. There was far more specificity when it came to the race or the ethnicities they wanted to see at the table. Area codes were called out as far as poverty rates in certain places that they wanted to see at the table, as well as targeted associations and service providers. And I guess it all speaks to the fact that I've read a lot about how the progression of movements can be paralyzed by political correctness, professionalism, and politeness. And what I really hope the future of the Food Policy Council in Detroit focuses on is calling out the organizations that they would like to see at the table. And like I said, that requires a little bit of discomfort, which is why I placed a heavy emphasis on anti-racism training. People need the tools and the language to talk about these issues, especially in Detroit. I have this really interesting map here that shows the high levels of segregation around housing and population in Detroit. Detroit, as Hallie stated earlier, has an 80% plus black population. And they live throughout the city, but surrounding the city, the suburbs are mainly made up of white people. And in southwest Detroit, you have Hispanic people. So basically what I'm getting at here is that you can't talk about poverty and inequity in the city of Detroit without acknowledging the racist undertones and outcomes of policies. Also, this council is extremely diverse. With 21 members, you've got a lot of people coming from different backgrounds, different sectors of the food system, and more often than not, in the 5 years that the Food Policy Council has existed, there have been a lot of tensions and miscommunications that have been, I think, taken the wrong way, that have, again, paralyzed a lot of the work from moving forward. And again, you know, my recommendation stated that anti-racism training would solve a lot, or would provide, again, people with these tools or with better language to understand how to move forward together. And finally, consistent collaboration. Like I said, the Oakland Food Policy Council and the Minnesota Food Charter did an excellent job of using their resources wisely. Because sometimes it's hard to galvanize folks around this thing called food policy. Not many people may know what it is or how the two talk to each other. But if you reach out to specific organizations that already offer a wide array of services and that touch on different subjects, like land or food, or land or transit or jobs or governance, you're far more likely to have an audience that's already socially conscious about what is important, but also able to garner or sift out some information regarding what they consider to be important about their food system. So again, community engagement is really important. It allows for policy to be carried out in the most ethical and equitable way possible, and at the same time, it prevents the most marginalized communities from being completely left out